Holla ballers! And I saw some of you say you really missed the holla ballers, and I think this is fair. So there's no big reveal in here. We've done most of our stuff for the day for what Blizzard gave us on this private realm. It was really cool to get invited to this and to see a real leap forward in Shadowlands content, although I imagine it's pretty much what's going to be in the beta coming next week. But to have that time to, you know, cancel the stream, let's focus on this, and we did play like through the night, so I'm very tired right now. I'm trying to stay awake. It's 8 o'clock, so I can actually get my schedule fixed pretty quickly. I don't want to be out of sorts for too long. But this is just going to be like a general thoughts and overview. I wanted to wait until most of the interviews were done with the devs in order to kind of summarize how I feel now after this unloading of information. We got so much stuff in the last 24 hours that I think it's really worth kicking back and sort of reflecting on it all as a whole and where we are. Now, I am going to put in here, so I'm kind of pre-warning you guys, I'm going to put in a very selfish section of this, of this discussion. It's going to be towards the end about how I feel at the very, very high end, because I think it's worth discussion. So let's talk about the actual Covenant system. Let's talk about soulbinds first of all. They're much better now. They're much, much better for most of the player base. Like, I really think like 99% of the player base is really not going to be too arsed about this system. There's still some issues with it, but compared to what it was, just the fact that they've seen how broken some of this stuff is, and we saw in the interview they're looking at the Covenant abilities that were a real mess. Blessed of the Paladins they talked about specifically with their Night Fae abilities just so bad. And if you watched our Covenant Wars video, we said that just needs to go. It's terrible. It's really bad for the game. Just get rid of it. And they've done that. Again, with the soulbinds, there are some abilities in there that were just so stupid that it was one of the reasons that we were thinking, it's not just the high end that kind of wants 4 characters here. This is going to affect everybody. Like, this screws the whole game up. And it was a message we were really trying to get out in the past week was, this isn't the big bad Mythic Raiders coming to take away people's fun. It's quite the opposite. It's like, this is game-ruining stuff. And it wasn't being dramatic. I mean, this is what's been created and put into the game, right? Somebody wrote this spell out and was like, that's okay. Let's put that in. And immediately, like, not even a pause, we look at it and we go, ugh, no, don't do that. And it's one of those things that makes people go, do you guys play this game? It was that outlandish. So it's really nice to see that they've pulled back on that a little bit in order to try and get some semblance of balance. And looking at the soulbinds and how they work, I truly do think that for literally everybody, it's going to be fine. For not everybody, literally everybody, what a stupid thing to say. For a lot of people, it's going to be totally fine. You'll equip your soulbinds as you want to. Some people will just get the first soulbind and leave it as that, and they'll be okay. They'll be totally okay. Like, they're closer in power strength and mechanical strength that it's really going to be only a problem at the very high end. So that was nice to see. It was depressing to see the discussion on the conduits. So the way we were working, we only got access for one account for our team. So the way we were covering it and managing to get so many videos done was we were watching a shared screen of me via Discord in order to talk about and discuss things amongst the team of people who are making the content for you guys as to how we feel about this stuff, any changes. And we were so dreading, like a week or so ago, we were dreading the conduit system. We were like, if they destroy these when they swap, this is a huge problem because there's always going to be, like, we want to respec. I know some people never respec. I can respect that. You just play the game, you do what you want to do. And for some of us, respecking is a big part of how we play. I respec for trash, you know, and I don't want to like regem for trash. That's crazy. So we were very afraid after the Legion relic situation where some people did want to swap relics was that we would have to refarm them. And we were talking about like demon hunters who needed their best relic came from, I think it was Upper Karazhan at its highest level. And they just had to hope that not only did someone get an Upper Karazhan key at a highest level, complete the Upper Karazhan and it be in the loot chest in order to get their relics. And I remember running so many Upper Karazhan for my guild demon hunters to get those relics. And the last thing that we want to do is that you then consume them and have to redo that multiple times. Certainly if you're using 3 of them, and then you're having to destroy them because the nature of the content we do calls for that. And I know a lot of people don't understand that. I'm fully aware that so many people don't understand why anyone would have that mentality. Like, why would you do that if you have to refarm these things? Sometimes the nature of the content we're doing calls for that. It like demands it of you in order to be able to overcome that obstacle. And the idea of having to farm, I mean, I don't know. I've done like 6 runs for 1 relic in the past. The demand to say, okay, every time I need to swap this because the content that Blizzard has put in front of me demands that of me, then I need to run maybe 10 mythic, high-level mythic pluses of a specific dungeon in order to get that conduit again. I'll get 3 of those conduits again is really not appealing and could be a big problem. So it was sad to see that. I hope they revert it. I've already seen a lot of the high-end players like already losing their minds, basically based off what I just discussed to you. Like, this is not cool. Can we please have some way of farming them, or perhaps we can reforge? If we get another high-level relic from a different dungeon, that we can reforge that into the one we want if we've already got it, like a duplication system or something like that. Lots of ideas flying around of just trying to eliminate this as a problem. But it is a problem that's going to affect very, very few people. I imagine most people are just going to say which is the best all-rounder, which is generally the best one, and I'll get that, and I'll work towards that. But once they're in, I'm certainly not going to farm them again. It also is definitely a potential issue. I mean, I'm talking about just conduits here, but a potential issue for people who play multi-specs, and that's depending on if those soulbinds, one of them turns out to be the best. But from what I'm seeing, I don't think that's a problem. I really don't. For again, the huge, overwhelming amount of people, I don't think that's a problem. I think most people will be fine if they do want to respec is having, if they do tank some dungeons and they're not doing it at like an MDI level and things like that, or they have to off tank a boss because this boss requires 3 tanks. I think they'll be more than fine having either their current soulbind but using a different pathway, which is what I showed in the video, or having another soulbind that's like, that's my tanking soulbind, and I set that one up for tanking when I want to use it. So I think people will be generally okay. And I was quite relieved to see that, because it's more about the effect it has on the wider game that really bothered me about a lot of this stuff. So the emphasis has gone 2 different ways, though, which has been really interesting. Is the emphasis is now back to the actual Covenant spells, which are still in a lot of, in dire need of a lot of work in some cases. I hope they relax this class focus and draw it back a little bit so that we can have some spec stuff. That would be pretty cool, because right now it is a problem. If you just want to enjoy the specs of your character, the abilities don't reflect that very well in a lot of cases. And it's not a thematic or RPG thing. I mean, the sooner we can dispense with this nonsense that it's an RPG thing. A Death Knight having a single target arcane damage dot is not an RPG element. Like, I think people get very biased by the very thematic and spectacular Covenant abilities that fit the theme of the Covenant and all that kind of stuff. I can buy into that. Like, you see the visual of it and you're like, oh, that's so, like, fitting. There's not a lot of them that are like that, okay? There really aren't. Like, it's such a skewed vision is to look at something like the Nightface Stomp, which puts this magical tree down, and then compare it to, like, a Druid Symbiosis, which occasionally does a damage proc. You're really biasing yourself towards your favoritism there. And the reality is that, no, a lot of these Covenant abilities aren't thematic at all. Some of them are, and the more famous ones that get talked about a lot, they sure are. But there's a lot that are swept under the rug. Not a lot of people are talking about the fact that we know, like, Dis Priest can create these, I think it's Dis or Holy, that can create these massive DPS skews individually. If you want to see that, check the Priest video where I'm on my Death Knight. I think it's the Necrolord, actually, where we tripled a Breath of Syndragosa uptime because the Priest was helping out, right? That's still in the game, so that still needs a lot of work, because that's going to be a big problem. But the emphasis has shifted back there. Although I imagine, and certainly for me, a lot of the Covenant emphasis has also now included these weekly events, especially after being able to do the Venthia Vampire Party one. And you look at the other ones and you think, wow, I can create my own abomination. That sounds awesome. And I would like to do that on a week-by-week basis. I haven't played it, so it might be garbage. Who knows? Or the boss rush for Kyrian, that's more up my alley, right? But I'm tied to a lot of other things, and that's got to be weighing on the decision process. And that's also something which I think Blizzard needs to be a little careful of. Those events are not going to be shown while you're leveling up, I don't think. which means that this is something that a lot of players are going to be uneducated about once they get there. So they might have heard, say, the Venthea teleport is very powerful, so I'm kind of pushed towards Venthea. Even if I don't like the class spell, I think taking Venthea is a wise choice, right? And then they're going to be presented with that vampire party, and they might go, oh, God, I have to do this every week. Now, some people are going to like the vampire party, but not everybody. I certainly was like, ooh, I don't fancy doing this every week. I can do it, sure. And if it means that Venthea is so much better for my Mythic rating, then fine, I'll put up with it, and I'll do the alt thing, which is where I think we should go next in this conversation. So right now, I think overall the system is better. It's workable. It won't dramatically kill. It won't be the big skews. In some cases, there's still some outliers. There are definitely some outliers, but my confidence in this comes from... What I'm not saying is it's perfect right now, but the path we're on is the right way. As long as Blizzard doesn't stop and go, oh, they're pretty happy now, we've got it right. Not yet, but the path is there. Some stuff does just flat out need removing, and some stuff needs heavily tweaking in order to get it in the right place. But we're on the right path where they're listening and saying, oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of dumb. Let's get rid of that. Let's pull it back. Yeah, we see why that's a big problem. So I'm feeling much better about the system for everybody else. Besides myself, by the way. I'm not in a good place. Like, personally, this is where we're going to get to the selfish stuff. There were some very cool announcements as well, like that weren't included in anything I could test, such as the Mythic Plus box will always have something good for you. And what they meant by that, and they clarified this on Mr. GM's interview, which was awesome, is that not only will the Mythic Plus box and the PvP box have selection of items, so you can pick one you want. If you're at the point where you just don't need any of those items, so even with a selection, there's still nothing you particularly need, they will give you some sort of resource, like an extra resource on top that you could use. Hopefully that's not just gold, but something actually useful. And another really good twist that I've seen is the return of being able to do a daily dungeon in order to complete your emissary quest. I love that. Like, that's perfect for me. That's so cool. I hate world quests now. I'm so over world quests. The concern early on will obviously be if reputation is overwhelmingly good, if they pull another Champions of Azeroth. And it's like, well, this arbitrary reputation just gives you this derpy item level upgrade for some fucking reason. That would be a problem for sure. But as it stands right now, you can either go and do dailies. But I really wonder if they're going to like be regretful of this. I hope not. Because it's like one dungeon or two dungeons even. It might be two dungeons. I've been unable to test that. But it might be one or two dungeons versus doing world quests with no flying. And I've done the world quests in the Shadowlands, the capped ones. No flying, going back to it again, really sucks. It does. It really sucks for content that you're just trying to get out of the way because it feels like mandatory stuff. So if we do get to the point relatively quickly, or even from the start, where reputation's not actually that big of a deal, then that would be cool. I'd be fine with that. I'd be fine with just smashing out the emissary and having some fun with the guys who also want to do theirs and then do alts and stuff and just play. It's encouraging me to play with my friends more. And world quests just haven't hit that mark for a really long time. So I'm really happy to see that return. That's been a really good positive change. The Covenant Sanctum stuff feels a little whitewashed. It's fine. I mean, it's not exciting. It's pretty cool visually, but I'm not overly excited by it. Like it's got some cool stuff. Like the channeling the anima looks visually cool. I mean, it's just that opening more world quests, and we just talked about world quests, right? So that's what it's doing. But the idea of it is awesome. That we're rebuilding the stocks. It fits with the theme of the game. No complaints. No complaints by it. I think it's okay. And it's something you can work on. But it does feel, again, not mandatory. It'd be interesting to see after we play a lot more of it how mandatory this stuff is. Because if it's not that mandatory, I'm fine with that as well. It's stuff you can do when you want to do it. What I don't want to... One thing I'm very much hoping doesn't happen is we feel the need like we did with Battle for Azeroth, where... Well, not even the need, but required for the content we do, to do like every world quest every single day. And that was my BFA gameplay, and I'm sure many others will feel the same for literally a month, or if not longer. It was like, right, log in, do every single world quest. Why? We need all these reputations. They unlock things we need. Is it fun? Absolutely not. And it's in fact killing my entire enjoyment of this new fresh expansion because I'm having to spend maybe an hour and a half every single day doing this content because we're on a schedule that coincides with Blizzard's schedule for when we're going to hit the requirements for this stuff. So that's something to bear in mind as well. Again, I understand not many people feel that way and maybe never even got Pathfinder or didn't get Pathfinder until way later. But we know, and this is always the problem that we have when it's at high-end stuff, is we know Blizzard is going to be expecting us to do that and design the encounters that we're going to face around you having done it. It's a very vicious cycle. And it does feel sometimes like Blizzard has doubled down on it by creating yet more hoops for us to jump through. You've got to remember that a lot of the Mythic Raiders that I play with and a lot of the high-end players really come from a background of simply being able to log in and raid. There was no hoops. There was gearing, then there was raiding, and then we did alt raiding, and we just enjoyed playing the game, and it was fine. That's what we had all the way up until Legion. Mr. Pandaria had a bit of stuff with the legendary cape, for sure. But for the most part, like, there was no big outside of the world grind. Like, it was fine. And we often say, like, certainly in Wrath and the Burning Crusade and the Cataclysm, if we say needed an extra Warlock, it was a case of somebody capping it and us using our resources as a guild to gear that guy up so he can be in the raid that week. And that was about it. There was nothing else special that needed to happen. There wasn't like some extra time gating. And I recently did see a lot of the rage from people like Sea-Doo and stuff where they're like, why can I not just build my corruption? Or why can't I go hard, get it done and get this character caught up so it's on par with everybody else? Why has it got to be like 11 weeks behind or whatever? What's the purpose of that? I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking with that. I don't get it. If it's just a case of catching up to where a more permanent player is, or a more permanently played character, I don't understand the need to time gate that stuff. It blows my mind, especially at the end of the expansion. Really odd decisions like that always confuse me. But overall, Shadowlands looks much better now for nearly everybody. I think that's fine. Now, I'm going to move to the selfish bit now. I've got to do that. From a high-end player's point of view, this is still an absolute clusterfuck. But I'm talking about the very high-end. It's worse than it's ever been. And that really annoys me. Because, again, I've just come back from this discussing with you, is that most of us, when we got into this stuff, we got into it on the basis that that was what we enjoyed, so that's what we focused on. And anything else was purely optional. Because a raid guild, which is obviously what I'm a part of, a raid guild is designed around the raid. That's what the guild's designed around. And within there, there'll be subsets of people who enjoy different things. Some people will want to go and farm every single mount. And that's what we have in our guild. Some people will want to get all optional reputations, right? So if it was the Burning Crusade, it'd be like going getting Sporagar, going getting the Netherstorm reputation, doing all those things. I don't want to do that. We're all playing together for the raid focus. So there's lots of us who have very, very different extracurricular activities outside of the one that we actually joined up to be a part of together. And that's where the problems lie when Blizzard says, oh, let's put in more hoops for you to jump through that aren't optional, but seriously affect what you're doing. Now, the soulbind system is so much better for most people. So much better. But for the very high end, it's fucking terrible still. And I had a lovely conversation with Slootbag and Nobble after the announcement yesterday where he was like, well, how much should the game alter to the very, very tiny percent? If they can get it right for like the 90 or 99% of players, how much should they change it for the 1%? And he's right. And that bugs me. Because every time, every expansion since Legion, it's gotten worse. It hasn't like kept an even keel. So Azerite Power would be a prime example, right? Azerite Power is a prime example. And we called it the Mythic Tax. And it is called the Mythic Tax. And this expansion is looking to have a hefty Mythic Tax. And the Mythic Tax also includes like the top MDI players or any group willing to push. And it also includes very high PvPers. Is that tax on playing at the extreme high end just keeps getting larger and larger to the point where it's really off-putting because we just want to play the game. And that's it. But they keep putting more and more hurdles in front of just getting to that point. And it's getting very, very tiresome. And I know that in my circles, like I'm putting out a positive vibe about a lot of the Shadowlands stuff, but in my personal circles, super poisonous. super poisonous. Like, it's really is about as poisonous as you could get right now. Definitely a lot of people who are like, I'm really considering just not playing. I would rather go and play Final Fantasy, or why don't we go make a Final Fantasy guild and just have giggles over there, where there's none of this, like, real bullshit to deal with. Because, and this is why, because I know some of you will be like, well, do you really need to do it? Often yes, actually. Often yes. And I think if we just look at the last tier, like Mythic N'Zoth at the, you know, at the current level progress, not when you overgear it. Remember, we're going to be tackling this content at the appropriate gear level, or even slightly under, but just due to the nature of the skill levels involved. That required, like, such a really crisp setup to get done. You know what I mean? They ask of us to bring 8 immunity classes. Like a minimum. And I know we scraped by with 7, but that required a lot to go right in our favor. Like, a lot of things to go right in our favor in order to pull that off. And that was still, like, it wasn't the top 100, but it wasn't one of the early kills, where it's really down to something being slightly overpowered or something being slightly exceptional at that fight. I can't express to you guys who've never been there how much of a difference it makes. And now that a lot of that is optional and gear is less relevant. So I think this is a good topic to bring up here, is a lot of people who play WoW still believe that item level is kind of king dick. And that's really not the true. Borrowed power is pretty much everything at this point. And we did some testing on this where we took 2 characters at 470 and one of them was optimized at 470. So, like, the correct corruption choices, the correct essence choices, correct Azerite choices. And then we took another 470 and exact same item level, very similar items. We even bought some of the same stuff at the auction house. And that character can't get away from the stuff it has. So it had decent corruptions, not optimized, but decent. It had decent essences, because I was playing the weaker character and I simply, on my alt, did not have the choices of everything on it. So I tried to put, like, slightly worse ones in, but they were still decent for that class. And, like, slightly wrong Azerite choices. Like, slightly wrong. And the difference is 40%. And I know that's a big thing. That, 40%. That's what the number is. Like, in output of those characters, there's a 40% differential that's due to the borrowed power. That's how strong it is. Now, that's as it is now. Now, to be fair, and I will be fair here before everyone goes memeing me, is that 8.3 is a complete clown fiesta and a circus right now. Okay, we understand that. But that's the kind of strength we're looking at sometimes. And if you look at the world first races, which is obviously, we're in very top end territory here, so I feel comfortable talking about that. We saw crazy things being done because of how broken some of these systems are. We saw, you know, blood DKs as DPSs, just so they could wear 100 plus corruption of Echoing Void, because that was currently busted. And now we're talking about the borrowed powers multiplying on themselves, which they still do, although it's less extensive, but it will add up. Unfortunately, it is still going to add up. Although it won't matter for most people, it's still going to matter. And we do feel that Blizzard does tune bosses. You look at how tight the kills were for N'Zoth, for every guild, especially those doing it in appropriate gear, how tight that is to get done. It's so tight. Requires not only immense player skill throughout all of it, but also requires a really on-point composition of players and classes. And in most cases, those guilds are utilizing what are currently considered the most powerful classes and spending hundreds of millions of gold in order to acquire these items, but this borrowed power system, in order to enhance upon that. And even with all that maximization, still scraping over the finish line. That's how tight it is. So even if you've never played it, I hope you witness that when you watch the World First Races. That's the kind of content we're dealing with. And it's designed that way because Blizzard knows it's possible. Blizzard knows it's possible. And so if we end up in the scenario, which it looks like we are barreling headfirst to it, that it's the Covenant abilities plus the slightly, this is how it magnifies on itself. We have a boss that is requiring a lot of add damage. So if there is a class ability that is slightly better than even like 3 or 5%, right? So that's kind of a fair assessment. So your class ability is 3 or 5% better at dealing with that. And one of the soulbinds within that tree is 3 or 5% better than the other ones. And then the conduits that you put in are 3 or 5% better than the other choices. Then we're going to end up, and then the legendaries that back them up, of course, because we've just seen some extraordinarily powerful legendaries come out of Warlocks in particular. Warlocks right now are rubbing your hands together. You want some really early predictions of what's going to be broken AF? Warlocks. Warlocks are looking like GG right now. Then that adds up, because that all adds onto each other, right? And then, of course, one thing Sloot was trying to bring up is like, how do we value the mechanical power of some of these? So everybody, when I talk about percentages, a lot of people like to say, well, it's 5% more DPS. It depends, because we can't put a value on something like Venthia Teleport. What we do know is it's a significant increase, especially when multiple people are doing it. So if we look at a fight like Raden, where for the first Mythic kills, killing the ads that spawn at that fight before they reach Raden was really tight. Really tight. And I'm sure if any of you wants to go back and watch the World First Raiders, or people even from the top 40 guilds we were following there, trying to do Raden, just how tight that DPS check was. The ability to have the melee instantly appear there, or even run over and just be able to get back to the boss instantaneously and cut down all that travel time and utilize their movement abilities defensively instead of having to save them for this moment and cover those huge gaps is massive. And you can't put a DPS value on that. Like, a percentage doesn't apply to that. It's so big. And then you look at a fight like Il'gynoth, right? And anybody who's seen Il'gynoth's no dispel strategy, where the whole raid is pulsing this damage out, and so it's very important you all stay spread, but sometimes you need to stand on top of each other because of the way the pulse is happening, right? You want desynced pulses so the healers have a good amount of time to kind of top you up before the next pulse. The ability to teleport over people that are pulsing incorrectly and land directly without passing through anyone else, skipping all that raid damage that would occur to, say, maybe 3 to 5 players and land exactly where you want to be. You can't put a number on that when it's happening multiple times around the raid. So that's a big deal as well. So all this adds up depending on their raiding counters. And we do have beta testing of the new raid, Castle Nathria, this month. And I'm really going to be interested to see how the raid design is. And you might get a very different video from me where I come back and I'm like, no, fuck this. Like, this is busted. Like, so what we did is we all swapped over to, I don't know, we all swapped over to Nightface so we could blink through this ability, and therefore the entire mechanic was null and void. Or we all swapped to this soulbind, which had this ability in it, like 4% flat extra damage, and we just buried the boss into the ground because we multiplied that 4% direct damage by 20 people, and that just overwhelmed the boss. So you might get a very different video out of me there. But it doesn't change the fact that, as it stands right now, if you are competitive at WoW, which isn't everybody, if you are competitive at WoW, it still seems unavoidable with this system that we would require multiple characters of the different covenants in order to deal with the encounters. And I think thinking it's some sort of EP and flex is incorrect. Just to deal with some of the encounters we're likely to face unless we ruffle stomp through the raid, in which case we're all going to be disappointed anyway. So that's something we need to consider at the very high end, is it's still absolutely awful. And I would like to put this plea out to Blizzard, honestly. Why are you making us jump through all these hoops? I still don't understand. I don't know whose decision it was that there should be this exterior power grind that... And now you've twisted it into something new. Like, at least with Azerite power, and God knows I hated Azerite power and farming those goddamn islands, while simultaneously the casual player base is saying, well, I don't need to, because nothing the game gives me needs that neck level. Whereas at the Mythic end, we're like, we have to do this or our armor doesn't work, right? And now we're getting to the point where it requires multiple characters. I really have to question the sanity of this stuff. I am totally into the Covenants, like, so much. They're so fun. And I don't get why this attachment of power to it. I don't get it. I don't know who thought it was a good idea. I don't understand why they're not entirely world-based. If you're going to do it, why not make it entirely world-based? I mean, it made sense to me that the soulbinds would be out in the open world with you, but they're not. They're a mission table follower. And other than that, they don't exist. Like, as far as I can see right now. I mean, maybe that'll change, but right now it doesn't exist. So why not make those talent trees, those whole big talent trees, just open world benefits? Quicker use of reach your latest. If we look at Revendreth, that gets the mirror system. Access the mirror system much quicker in a target location, you know? Like, it teleports you to the nearest mirror so you can move around quicker. Gives you slightly better rep rewards for all I care. I don't care. Well, I don't do it that way so it doesn't skew into everything else. And as for the abilities, I still stand by what I said. You know what I'd rather have? I would rather have the conduits inside these craftable legendaries. So I can build the legendary around what I'm going to use the conduit for. Like, that would be so much better in my eyes. And the abilities, I still think the abilities should be artistically redesigned, just graphically redesigned so we have the choices of them. And make the soulbinds, if they're thematic and they're going to tell a story and a campaign, because I know right now I'm fighting for the 1%, but I can't express to you enough, guys, like how much this fucks over these people. Like, it really fucks them over. And I still don't see the point in it. Having slightly more movement speed after using an ability is great open world. We don't need it in this environment. I'd rather not deal with it at all. In the fact, this expansion is looking like there's so much cool shit to do with alts. Like, so much cool shit. That I'd just rather be able to level my alts and go fuck about with abominations and things like that. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. I just don't understand. And I'm still lost with it. I know it won't affect so many of you, but I stand here and I say, I still don't think it makes their game better. I don't believe that. I have to say, down to my heart of hearts, I don't see how it makes them better, because no matter how many people throw the word meaningful choice down my fucking throat, as I said, most of these abilities are not a meaningful choice. If you're, like I said, if your DK's arcane single target dot it feels like a big meaningful choice, I will, if someone brings that person to me, I will show you a liar. No question. No question. I will show you a liar. Like, get out of here with that nonsense. Random power procs, nonsense. Just because my Paladin's hammer has a green glow around it and not a blue one or a red one or a different kind of blue one does not make me feel like a Necrolord, right? Throwing a Vanquisher's hammer with a Paladin does not make me feel like somebody who's representing the undead. It doesn't. It's a lie. It's an absolute lie. But there you go. That's my little ranty rant on where I feel right now. Looking forward to how the Shadowlands is going to develop. I still think this is the wrong choice to make, because I am not a fan of anything that screws over people's gameplay. And that's my final comment on it. I'm totally against, and yes, it does affect me, that my bias is clearly there. But I don't understand why anyone would want to put something in this game and celebrate something that really, really fucks over its some of the players' gameplay. I don't. All right. Bye-bye.